Have you ever been in the middle of a deep conversation? Maybe you're explaining a complex idea or sharing a vulnerable memory, and you suddenly realize you've been staring at a spot on the wall over your friend's left shoulder for the last 2 minutes. Or perhaps you're on the other side of that equation. You're listening to someone, but you feel this intense, almost magnetic pressure to look away, as if maintaining eye contact is physically draining, like holding a heavy weight above your head. If you force yourself to hold their gaze, your mind goes blank. You stop listening to what they're saying and start obsessing over the mechanics of the interaction. Am I staring too much? Is this creepy? Should I blink now? If this sounds familiar, or if you know someone who constantly shifts their gaze, you've likely encountered the widespread cultural assumption that eye contact equals honesty and confidence. We are taught from a young age to look people in the eye. We hear it in job interview advice, dating tips, and even from parents scolding children. The narrative is simple. If you look away, you have something to hide. You're shifty, you're untrustworthy, or maybe you're just rude and uninterested. But what if I told you that for a huge portion of the population, looking away has nothing to do with deception and everything to do with how their brains are wired? What if breaking eye contact is actually the brain's way of trying to connect better? To understand why some people struggle to meet your gaze, we have to stop thinking of eye contact as just a social rule and start looking at it for what it biologically is, a massive sensory event. When you lock eyes with another human being, you aren't just looking at an object. You are engaging in a process called mutual gaze, and it triggers a cascade of chemical and electrical reactions in your brain. For many people, this is a pleasant, bonding experience. It releases oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, which fosters trust. But for others, that same input feels less like a warm hug and more like a spotlight interrogation. Let's dive into the fascinating concept of cognitive load. Imagine your brain is a computer with a specific amount of RAM. Every task you perform takes up a bit of that processing power. Listening to someone talk takes some power. Formulating a response takes more. Regulating your emotional reaction takes even more. Now add eye contact to the mix. Processing a human face is incredibly complex. You aren't just seeing eyes, you are micro-analyzing pupil dilation, eyebrow twitches, crinkles in the skin, and subtle shifts in expression that signal distinct emotions. It is a high-bandwidth activity. For people who are deep thinkers or those who process information deeply, maintaining eye contact while trying to think is like trying to stream a 4K movie while downloading a massive file on a slow internet connection. Something has to buffer. Psychological research has actually shown that when we ask people to answer difficult questions, they almost instinctively look away. It's not avoidance, it's resource management. By breaking eye contact, you are essentially turning down the volume on your visual input so you can hear your own thoughts clearly. If you've ever turned down the radio in your car so you could park better, you understand exactly why people look away during conversation. They aren't tuning you out. They are looking away so they can focus entirely on what you are saying without the distraction of your face. But there is a deeper, more emotional layer to this, one that goes beyond just brain power. We have to talk about the intensity factor. In the animal kingdom, a fixed gaze is rarely a casual invitation to chat. It is often a signal of threat or dominance. If you stare down a dog or a primate, you are challenging them. While humans have evolved to use gaze for affection, that primal wiring is still there in our amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats and processing fear. For people with social anxiety, or those who are highly sensitive, direct eye contact can trigger a spike in physiological arousal. It's not necessarily fear in the sense that they think you're going to attack them, but it's a feeling of being exposed. They feel seen in a way that feels raw and vulnerable. Imagine living in a house with no curtains, and everyone who walks by stops to stare through the window. That is what constant eye contact feels like for a socially anxious person. It feels invasive. By looking down or to the side, they are metaphorically pulling the curtains closed for a second, just to feel safe enough to exist in the conversation. It's a self-soothing mechanism, a way to regulate that spike in adrenaline so they don't go into fight or flight mode right in the middle of a coffee date. This brings us to a really important intersection of psychology and neurodiversity. We see this trait frequently discussed in communities of people with ADHD or autism. For a neurodivergent brain, the sensory input of eye contact can be overwhelming. Some studies suggest that for autistic individuals, the part of the brain that processes faces is hyperactive. Looking into someone's eyes can physically feel intense, almost like a burning sensation or a loud noise. It's simply too much information at once. And here is where the tragedy of misunderstanding comes in. A person with ADHD might be looking around the room, fidgeting, or staring at the ceiling while you talk. To the neurotypical observer, this looks like boredom. It looks like they want to be anywhere else. But inside that person's head, they might be hanging on your every word. They are letting their eyes wander so their ears can focus. If you forced them to stare into into your eyes, they would spend 100% of their mental energy trying to act normal and maintaining the gaze, and they would hear absolutely 0% of what you actually said. So in a strange irony, the person looking at the floor might be listening more approximately than the person nodding and staring right at you. We also can't ignore the role of shame and self-esteem. Eye contact is a transaction of status and worthiness. When we feel confident, we tend to hold our heads up. When we feel ashamed, guilty, or inferior, we physically collapse. We tuck our chins. We avert our gaze. This is often rooted in childhood. If a person grew up in an environment where they were constantly criticized, or where they felt they had to make themselves small to survive, looking someone in the eye feels like an act of defiance they aren't ready for. It feels dangerous to claim that space. They might struggle to meet your gaze because, on a subconscious level, they don't feel worthy of that connection, or they fear that if you look too closely, you'll see the flaws they are desperately trying to hide. It is also worth noting that this rule of eye contact is entirely cultural. If you are watching this from a Western perspective, you likely view eye contact as a sign of respect. But in many Eastern, Latin American, and African cultures, prolonged eye contact with a superior or an elder is actually considered aggressive and disrespectful. In those contexts, lowering your eyes is the ultimate sign of reverence. So sometimes what we read as shifty behavior is actually just a cultural mismatch. We are judging a global human behavior through a very narrow, local lens. So, where does this leave us? If you are the person who can't make eye contact, you might have spent your life feeling broken. You might have forced yourself to stare at people's nose bridges, counting the seconds, terrified that you're being judged. It's exhausting, isn't it? But here is the perspective shift. Your inability to make eye contact isn't a character flaw. It is a sign that your brain prioritizes information differently. You are likely a deep processor. You are sensitive to the energies of others. You are trying to protect your cognitive bandwidth so you can show up in the conversation authentically rather than just performatively. And if you are the person on the receiving end, the one who feels ignored when someone won't look at you, try to reframe that experience. Instead of thinking they are hiding something, try thinking they are thinking deeply. Instead of feeling rejected, consider that they might be regulating their own intensity to stay present with you. There is a beautiful kind of intimacy in parallel play, in sitting side by side with someone and looking out at the world together rather than constantly looking at each other. Real connection isn't about two laser beams locked in a staring contest. It's about a shared emotional space. The next time you're talking to someone and their eyes drift to the corner of the room, let them go. Don't chase their gaze. Let them have that visual break. You might find that when they do come back to you, the connection is realer, deeper, and more honest than any forced stare could ever be. Because ultimately, we want to be heard and understood, and sometimes, to truly hear someone, we have to look away.